Welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Show with Ryan Greenberg and Nick Kalfas. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Millionaire Show. We are here with Mike Griffith, right? Did I say that right?
That's Griffith? Right, Griffith. Yep.
Griffith.
That's
Griffith. Right. Mike is a state delegate.
That's right.
And I purposely today, we were talking at the gym this morning, and then when Nick got here, none of us know what a state delegate is.
Oh, well,
so,
that's a great question then.
First question of the day. What is a state delegate?
State representative. So just like you talk about D.C., you have Congress, the House, and the Senate. Well, the House delegates is the House for Maryland, right? So I'm like a congressman, but at the state level, right? So So you have the House delegates and then the Senate. So it's the exact same form of government as you have in D.C. So I'm a state representative, basically, right? So some states are called representatives. In Maryland, we're called delegates.
How many state delegates are there?
So there are 141 of us representing the entire state, and then there's 47 senators, and then House, Senate, and the executive branch, which is the governor.
So there's 141 state delegates. How are they picked?
We're elected.
By the county?
By
people in the county?
By people in our constituency, right? So it's not by county. It's carved up by, same way like with Congress, right? It's carved up based upon population. My district's based upon population. I have about 85,000 people I represent, and every 4 years I have to run for re-election, and then hopefully my constituents decide to send me back, and if they do, then I get to go back and duke it out in Annapolis for another 4 years. So
how many times can you run? Is it
there's no term limits on the legislature. Typically only on executive branch, like county executive, mayor of like Baltimore City, for example, governor, things of that nature. So.
Is this something that people do for like lifetimes? Like
some do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one member that's been there for 43 years. I don't intend to spend a lifetime in the legislature.
Right.
It takes a bit of a toll, but for as long as I feel like I can be effective and not burn out on it, I'm going to continue to try to.
How many years have you been in?
6 years.
6 years.
This is my sixth legislative session.
And it's 4-year terms.
4-year terms. I'm running for re-election in 26.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
So what are some of the things that like a state delegate would do?
I mean, so we're lawmakers, just like you would be in Washington, D.C., right? A little bit less political in Annapolis because the closer you are to the people, the less political it is, right? When you're, in D.C., you can be very, very political. You don't really, interact with your constituents as much. But on my level, I can interact with them every day. So passing laws, fighting laws, trying to stop laws, or we call kill bad bills. And then also a lot of it's helping the people I represent navigate state government. Everything from the Easy Pass fiasco and making sure my folks could fix Easy Pass issues during COVID. It was a lot of, dealing with
I've had
people
some
getting
Easy Pass stories.
Yeah, I got some Easy Pass.
So the Hayden Bridge is in my district, right, and up in Susquehanna River, and so I heard a bunch of people saying they're having issues with their Easy Pass and being billed, and so I just post on Facebook, hey, if you have any issues with Easy Pass, reach some office. I'll try to help you out, right? Thinking it's going to be like my constituents. 3,000 emails in a day that I got from sharing that thing.
I believe
that post got shared 1,000 times, 355,000 interactions on that Facebook post. Yeah,
do you think there was a problem?
Well, it's one of those things like, hey, let me do a little nice thing for my constituents. Like, let me see if I can help them out through this. And then it just went nuts. So,
yeah, Easy Pass, they're a bunch of scammers. I feel like I got some of the bills I've gotten from them are like crazy bills, and then it takes you 3 hours to fight with them on the phone, and
there have been some issues, but it's beyond that. It's everything from just navigating state government in any form, and we don't always think about how often we interact with state government, right? It could be MVA, it could be taxes, it could be, you name it. So if my constituents have an issue navigating state government, that's where I can step in and intervene and get those problems right to the front of the line. So that's also probably the most useful thing we do is helping people.
What's your background prior to politics?
Sure. So I'm a former Marine, or I guess Marine, however you want to say it, 2 tours in the Marine Corps as a military policeman. I've been in business development for 20 years, currently help run a title company, but in a variety of different industries. I serve on the board of the Maryland Builder Association right now. Also serve on the board of the ARC, which is a special needs nonprofit that supports special needs adults. I'm on the board of that. And also work for, it's a law firm and a title company I work for as well. So, business development, supporting the real estate industry. I'm not an investor myself, but I support the real estate industry in a variety of ways. And then kind of fell into politics. It kind of, there's people that plan their entire life to run for office. Those are the ones who don't get there. It's the people that kind of falls into it. And it was never an aspiration or a dream. It just kind of happened. So, yeah.
So can you explain a little bit of how it happened and like what made you become a state delegate?
So I worked on helped Larry Hogan quite a bit. And early on, in a very grassroots, low level, nobody knows or cares who I am kind of way, right? But that's where it starts, right? Like, in politics, there's a lot of people who say they're going to do. The people that don't talk and actually do, people want workers. Just like in our industry or whatever, people want people that are going to show up and work. And showing up's half the battle. And then I was working for a guy who ran for a state delegate seat, and I helped run the campaign and did a lot of legwork. And a lot of people kind of took notice of that. So then I ran for a state party. The state party is the organization for the entire state, but each county has one. So I ran for the Republican Central Committee in Harford County, got elected to that in 2018, and then became the chair of the committee in short order. And then right after that, my predecessor resigned. And then Governor Hogan, appointed me to replace him. So I was originally appointed and then ran for re-election in 22. And then here I am.
So appointed for somebody that's an idiot like me means that somebody just put you in that position. Nobody voted you in yet.
Initially. Right? Because it was an open seat and we don't have special elections for,
like when somebody vacates it.
Right. So I was appointed originally and then got reelected in 22. But the governor is the one who appoints you, and the governor appointed me. So
okay.
Yeah.
So you said there's 141 state delegates, and are they? What do you refer to you said the 85,000 people? What are
My
they called?
constituents.
Okay, so is that a specific area where they're?
Yes, it's all based upon geography.
Got it.
So I have a large portion of Harford County and a little bit of Cecil County. And it's all population based. And it's about when they draw the lines, they really start from the edges. They start from, out western Maryland and then southeastern Maryland. And then they kind of work inward and when drawing the lines. So because you have some, like when you're drawing the lines for population Eastern Shore, you can't cut across the Bay Bridge. You have to work up and around. Mm-hmm. So, and that's kind of the couple of starting points, and then they work and eventually kind of descend upon Prince George's, Montgomery County, things of that nature, where they kind of end up at the end of the drawing of the line. So, but it's all population based.
So then those specific areas that each state delegate is in, do they have some sort of control of the rules and regulations that happen in that specific area, or is it more of a state basis where everyone gets together and votes on whatever law is going to pass?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
So you're in charge of, you're a state delegate of that area that you described. Mm-hmm. Do you have like a way to create like a law or like a bill in that specific area, or is it based on the whole county?
What everything that we do has to be ultimately approved at the state level. For example, I introduced a bill a couple of years ago to reform Harford County's Board of Education. Right now, I needed the delegation, so all the members who go to Annapolis. So the delegation is all the members of the General Assembly that represent Harford County. They had to first sign off on the bill. And then it went for the full body of the General Assembly. And usually there's a thing we call in Annapolis called local control. So if my delegation supports a measure, the General Assembly is typically going to sign off on it. So yes, I do have the ability to write laws and pass measures and things of that nature for Harford and Cecil County specifically. And that is a piece of it. But it still needs the blessing of the full General Assembly. So, but we do affect local issues quite a bit, especially around like liquor laws. We do all alcohol matters are local issues that still have to be bubbled up to the General Assembly as an example.
So the Republican and Democrat thing, how does that fit into the state? Do you have one of each, or do people just vote for whoever they want?
Whoever they want, right? So we have our primaries, right? So I have to become the nominee of my party, and then I go to the general election and have to win the general election versus a Democrat from there. So for me as a Republican, and for Democrats it's vice versa. So, and then the General Assembly makeup right now, it's 100 in the House of Delegates is 102 Democrats, 39 Republicans. Oh, wow. So if you're on my side,
you're outnumbered.
We're outnumbered, but we punch above our pay grade, and And it's so important to be able to keep your voice, right? Like in Annapolis, like I don't approach it like bomb throwy or trying to attack people or attack their motives, right? But I fight on the issues. If you stay on the issues and you keep your voice, you can move the needle and get some stuff done. And we've had a lot of success in Annapolis in spite of some of the numbers there. So,
yeah. So we live in obviously a blue state, and we are in kind of a red industry, I'll say, in the real estate development space.
Sure.
So how does what you're doing affect kind of what we do on the real estate side?
Well, that's a big thing to consider. Everything we do affects the industry, right? For example, if you've paid attention at all, talk about the budget crisis we're facing, a $3 billion shortfall that could very easily escalate to $6 billion this year, right? And where's that money come from? Comes from everybody. And all these things eventually trickle down to, the industry. Perfect example. So these energy policies we've passed over the last 10 years that are about to jack rates up, in some cases as high as I've heard 800%, right? Because 40% of our power in Maryland is imported from other states. And some other states have some energy issues, right? So with that being said, other states can kind of control what they're charging us, and that could hurt us. And these are energy policies that date back to the 2000s, where we selected to eliminate our coal-fired plants in Western Maryland, to decide to eliminate the Brandon Shores plant. The fact that we decided to go with solar and wind farms off Ocean City versus invest in things like nuclear and other clean energy like natural gas. So we've invested in things that don't give us a return. We've eliminated what works, and now we're buying power from out of state, right? Those energy costs trickle down to you, to the folks, to your renters and the people that you support. It affects us in every single way, right? And that's just energy policy, right? And you talk about gas tax, and how that's impacted the industry. So these are just little things, right? And then you talk about the big things like education costs. Well, then education costs then impact fees, right? And then impact fees obviously affect, things like housing. And then when you have a $3 billion shortfall, they're going to look everywhere to get revenue, right? So there's a bill before us right now. So I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, and we deal with education, we deal with gaming, and we also deal with all tax law. There's a bill right now that would authorize counties to significantly increase property taxes. Well, that hits you. One of the mechanisms to help pay for the education bill is a bill to eliminate the inheritance tax. Now you'd be like, "Oh, eliminate the inheritance tax? That's great." No, because what the inheritance tax is, it only taxes distant family, but direct descendants, right? If you're passing something on to your kid, you don't pay an inheritance tax, right? So if you're looking to buy property for an investment property, right, and you're buying it from this individual, and it's being passed down from their mom or dad, right? There's no tax on it, and that factors into your cost of buying the property, to invest in the property, and obviously the bottom line, and financing and all those other things. But by eliminating the inheritance tax, then the whole thing moves over to the estate tax. Now, right now, the threshold for estate tax is $5 million. All right?
Does that mean, like you have a net worth of $5 million, or that's what you're passing?
The estate is $5 million, right? But in conjunction with eliminating the inheritance tax, which is really eliminating the direct descendant exemption, they're going to lower the estate tax to $2 million. Now think about that. A $2 million estate. So life insurance, we can't tax life insurance. It's considered part of the estate. So if you have a $1 million life insurance policy, you're halfway there on the jump, right? And if you have a property worth $300,000 and a couple investments, you're very easily at that $2 million threshold. And it's a 16% tax. So say you're looking to buy this property, right, that this individual just received from their parents who may have passed away, and now they're looking to sell it to an investor, right? Now you got to figure a 16% tax on that property, in addition to all the other math you've done. That's going to price certain properties out of the pool for investors completely. And that's part of the legislation we're considering right now. And this is a ripple effect, because of all the policies that we've put in place over the last 10, 12, 14 years on spending policies. And now they're coming to get the money.
But why would they tick down? Like, you'd think with inflation and like people are worth more now if you look at it because of inflation and everything else. Why would they move the number down rather than
because they're trying to get more revenue, right? If they lower the threshold for estate tax to $2 million, that means more people are paying that 16% estate tax, and because they've spent us out of control. Our budget, 10 years ago was $37 billion. This year it's $67 billion. Think about that. In a state of 6 million people, our budget's $67 billion. So what that means is now we have $3 million they got to find this year, right? Because we're required to have a balanced budget. We can't borrow money. We have to have a balanced budget according to our Constitution, and they're going to come get it. So these policies that the investor industry have not been paying attention to, at the end of every single bill that has any spending attached to it, at the end of that is a tax every single time. And those taxes ultimately bubble up to the industry, right? And the industry is going to feel the effects of this. And we're not even into landlord-tenant issues yet, which we're going to get into some, right? And the laws that are demonizing landlords, right? Are there bad landlords out there? Sure, right? But most people in this industry cannot be successful if they're a bad landlord, right? Like, that doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But landlords are bad. And we've passed legislation that actually have funded the opposition against you, right? I'll switch gears just briefly. We'll go back to the other thing, but while I'm on a roll. So a few years ago, when I was still in the Judiciary Committee, we passed a bill to increase the filing fee for evictions from $15 to $55. Guess where that $40 goes, that balance goes?
Out of my pocket.
No. Well, that's where it comes from. But guess where it goes to? They passed, as part of the bill, this money goes into a fund to pay for legal defense for evictees.
Wow.
So when you're going to court to evict somebody, and you're going to go walk up to the front, you'll see a paralegal jump out of the back of the room out of nowhere like a ghost. Poof, walk up, stand next to the person and said, "Hey, I'm going to represent you." And you're funding the legal defense against yourself, against somebody you're trying to legally evict.
Wow.
And then we've created that fund. So you're actually, when you file an eviction fee, you're paying for the defense against you. And that's why evictions have gone from 30 days, 90 days to now 9 months to a year and a half to evict somebody legally, because they have legal defense and legal counsel paid for by you that's telling them exactly how to game the system. Like, for example, Baltimore City right now, you can have somebody for 3 months, and you go to make the eviction move, right? And they pay 1 month. That buys them another 3 months. Do it again, and they can do it up to 3 times, right? So after 9 months, you've received 3 months rent.
We're gonna have to cut this out of the episode so that the tenants can't hear that.
I don't think many tenants are listening.
That's what I was just saying.
Not a lot of tenants probably listen to this, but these are things that, frankly, the investor networks should be coming down to Annapolis and testifying on, right? And the only people that testified on it was the big, major
Corporations.
Developers and, but that's not the majority of people. They control the majority of units, but the volume is the guys that have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 individual units, right? And the people that, your margins are very small. It doesn't take a lot for a property or your entire business to become upside down, right? And a major shift in the market could hurt you, or a major policy shift at the state or county level could certainly hurt you as well. And, your voices have not been heard in this process, right? And it means coming down, being educated, knowing who your local and state elected officials are, being in their ear, right? Because you're just, you're faceless people that are landlords, therefore you're bad, right? And you're predatory by nature, according to some people in Annapolis. And we know that's not true. There are those people, right?
So does that mean that we have the opportunity as landlords to come down there and voice our opinion
100%.
Before the bill's passed, and to kind of give them
in the bill hearing, right? So it happens 2 ways, right? So certainly when we have a bill hearing, you can sign up to testify before the committee. And also, if you know who your local electeds are, they'll meet with you. They'll sit down. They'll talk to you, right? And hear your concerns. and start affecting it, right? So you have multiple opportunities to impact these policy decisions. But again, it's more than just the ones that directly affect you. It's the ones that indirectly affect you as well, right? And energy policy, education policy with big, what we call a physical note. So a physical note is the explanation of the financial impact of a piece of legislation, right? Anything with a physical note, anything that costs money is ultimately going to come back to you because it's, land, energy, property taxes, assessments, all these things. Like, here's a big one. There's a bill, it's going to be a tax bill. It's going to be rolled into another bill that's going to tax an LLC at the full amount, at the gross, right? So think about that for a second, how it impacts you. Not the net. You're going to be taxed at the gross for your LLC or S corps.
So wait, that's crazy? So you make $1 million, and you're gonna be, and if that's your gross, and you only net 100,000, you're gonna be taxed
at $1 million.
But then how's that possible? If
that's the bill. That is a bill.
That's insane.
That's something they're looking to actively pass.
That's wild.
And when that comes down,
how would you even afford that?
Right, right. And because but that's 100% part of the plan right now for this legislative session. So when that bill comes down, everyone in your network, all your people listen and watch, need to be down testifying on that bill, saying how this will destroy you.
Yeah.
So how do we get access?
That would de-incentivize us to reinvest or do anything besides save money to pay taxes. Essentially, right?
Yes.
We wouldn't hire more people. We couldn't hire more people.
Couldn't do that.
Right.
So how do you find out about these bills that are getting ready to be passed or that are in the works to go down there?
You go to the General Assembly website. You can look up legislation. And there's a mechanism to search for legislation by topic. So you can search real estate, tax, whatever the case may be. And then you can look up the bills that are being introduced, right? Or you can contact me. My email is mike.griffith@house.state.md.us. Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help walk you through the process on.
It's a hell of an email.
In 2 weeks.
It is a mouthful.
In
There's
2
lots
weeks,
of
it's going to be impossible for you to open those 10,000 emails that you're going to get.
Well, let's go. I mean, let's go. I'm happy to, only contact me if you actually want to come testify. But, because I don't want 100 people saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But if you want to come testify, I will help. I can help walk your viewers and your listeners through the process of where to sign up, how to sign up, and then to come out and testify.
That's not just for your constituents.
That's anybody in the state.
In the state of Maryland.
Anybody in the state who's affected by this legislation.
And what does that do? Like if we just got 10,000 people to come testify, like
you got 10,000 people.
What would that do?
It would.
Would that change some stuff?
Yes, it would.
But is that just from the volume of the people that would come down there? Like, how would that change what they already planned to?
Because when there's mass opposition to something, it gets people's attention. Because if you have 1,000 people down there, how many of those are this person's constituents, that person's constituents?
Oh,
right?
okay, I see.
That really matters.
So who's it come down to passing the bill?
I mean, the General Assembly. If you have the majority of the General Assembly, the bill is going to pass. But it starts in the committee. So the first line of defense is me in my committee that handles the taxes. And then if it passes from there, then it goes to the General Assembly and then has to go to the Senate and then to the governor, right?
How many people are in the General Assembly?
I mean, it's 141 delegates and then 47 senators.
That's part of the General Assembly.
Yeah, the General Assembly is the two houses of government, houses, the House and Senate. Yep.
So who's introducing like a bill like that? Is it somebody like you on the other side, basically?
Yes, or even on my side, somebody could, So, I'm introducing a dozen bills this year on a variety of topics. None of them real estate related, but other members introduce the legislation. Then you try to get co-sponsors, and then you have the bill hearing where you're presented before the committee, and then you got to work the bill and try to get it through the committee and try to get support from various organizations, and there were people opposed. But a perfect example was in 2020. It was a bill introduced, which was reintroduced last year, which we were able to kill again, a services tax, which this bill would absolutely crush the investor industry. So it put a tax on every single service. To define a service, right? Title insurance, title companies, service, lawyers, service, any home inspectors, service, right? Plumbers, service, electricians, service. You go down the line. Everybody that you guys hire that touches your properties to rehab, renovate, maintain, make sure they're good to go. Realtors would be taxed on this, right? Mortgage services, taxed, right? We estimate for a new home, it would increase the cost of a new home by $14,000 alone, just in taxes, right? Much less an investment property. And when you're talking about these small margins, and you're looking for the right property, right price, with enough meat on the bone to be able to make the investment, right? All these things start eating those margins. These taxes, estate taxes, energy costs that are going to affect, right? Because as energy costs go up, right, you start losing people that you can rent to. Right, because that's another piece of the pie. Can they even afford the energy cost to live in that home anymore? Right?
Yeah, I was just getting hounded the other day by some solar guys, and they were talking about that. That's basically their pitch. They have the clean energy bill that's coming out, and you got to go solar. It's a race to solar. So, I mean, what is this? What is this clean energy thing? And can you kind of touch on that?
Sure. So the state wants to be carbon net zero by 2035, which will not happen. That's forced electrification of a lot of buildings of a certain, I think it's 30,000 square foot or higher, have to be fully electric. Obviously, the EV mandate, electric vehicles, mandating that be 100% by 2034, and the threshold of being at 43% by 2026, which is impossible because the mandate, it's not vehicle sold in Maryland. Each individual car maker has to have 43% of their cars sold in Maryland, 43%. Right, which is impossible, and we're like at 1% right now. So that's not happening.
Right.
And then they're going to raise more taxes because one of our big revenue streams is the gas tax to pay for highways and roads and stuff. So the more electric vehicles you have, the less people you have driving gas-powered vehicles, which means less revenue. So they got to find other revenue streams, other places. Right. So everything's a house of cards. Right. It really is. So, and these are the things that you and your listeners should be paying attention to, because all this is going to have a direct impact on the industry.
So when are mayors able to make their own bill, and if so, does it still have to go through the General Assembly?
Well, so you have the three levels of government. You have municipalities, which is like towns and cities. Then you have the counties, and you have the state. Right, the state has the ultimate authority. Right, so we can pass a bill that forces the hand of the county or the municipality. But so the towns make their own laws. But if they need something done at the state level, then they'll come to us, and we'll introduce a bill on behalf of the city of Havre de Grace or Harford County government, things of that nature, if it needs state approval. But each, like Baltimore City, passes their own laws. Cities like Aberdeen, pass their own laws. Counties pass their own laws. But also the state has the ability to preempt local laws. So if the state passes a bill that says the entire state does this, then the counties and the towns have to get in line. Now, they're going to fight like hell to stop those bills because nobody wants their authority taken away, and I respect that. But that's,
So does Baltimore City have delegates, or they just have...
they have their city government, they have the mayor and the city council, but they have delegates and senators. Every member, every person in the state of Maryland has a delegate or a senator, no matter where you live.
Okay, so to go on to this energy thing real quick, the energy that we're getting, where is it coming from?
So 60% right now is produced in Maryland, like Conowingo Dam, Calvert Cliffs, the nuclear plant there, Brandon Shores, the coal-fired plant that they're trying to shut down, but they're delaying because if they shut down Brandon Shores right now, as was the original plan, we would have rolling brownouts throughout the state. I had a briefing about this morning. So right now, 40% of our power we're importing from other states because we have had terrible policies on producing our own. We've avoided nuclear, which is the cleanest form of energy out there is nuclear, right? There's a stigma to it, but cleanest form. Clean coal, natural gas is a clean form of energy because it has gas on there. Some people think it's, dangerous. And then we've poured a bunch of money into trying to get offshore wind, which is now probably dead with the Trump administration coming in. We've a bunch of money into solar. But even with solar, right, you can't even, fully realize what solar can produce because you have to have enough opportunity on the grid. So right now there are farmers in the Eastern Shore fighting to get more solar farms, but that part of the grid is full, so it doesn't make any sense, right? And because we are buying a lot of our energy from Pennsylvania, for example, and the dirty secret is we shut down a lot of our power production in Maryland for the sake of the environment, because we didn't want coal-fired plants here in Maryland.
But we're buying energy from the coal.
We're buying coal-fired plant energy from Pennsylvania. So we're doing the exact same thing, just we're not doing it in Maryland, so it makes everybody feel better. But it's not. It's a net zero, a net neutral carbon impact, because we're still buying the same types of energy other places.
So is someone like BG&E, Baltimore Gas and Electric, just a service that gets that energy from one place to the other place?
That's right. I mean, BG is getting beat up for some of their rate hikes and some of the things they're doing right now. People, there's a lot of people being blamed for the policies of the General Assembly. BG is just the person, the individual providing the power and figuring the whole thing out. But these are policy decisions we've made at the General Assembly.
So does BG&E buy the power from these other locations that you mentioned, like other states, and then
they produce power, but they're the ones kind of negotiating, bringing this power in from out of state. And there's different, and that's just Baltimore, right? There's, you have other power companies on the Eastern Shore, and
you have Pepco,
Southeast,
like
Pepco, exactly. Delmarva Power.
Is BG&E just, are they paying more for energy now, or are they just trying to like increase the rate because it's been pretty reckless lately?
They're doing a $24-$28 rate hike because they have to do some improvements tied to some of these energy policies and getting more power from the state. But when we're buying power from Pennsylvania, they're marking it up to sell to us, because when they sell power to us, that's less power for them, right? And because we're not self-sufficient with our energy production, that cost gets put onto us, which gets put on to you and your tenants, and everything that you do from day to day, from running your business to the power saw to do improvements in your properties, right? All those costs slowly start to trickle up. And God forbid now, if we pass a services tax, right? You hire somebody to do it. Now you're paying 6% on top of everything else on every single service you hire. And that's appraisals, that's everything.
So this services tax, because that's something as a general contractor and property manager, I imagine would really affect.
It'll have a crushing effect.
So let's just say, how are they taxing that? Like, is it on my gross revenue that I bring in?
Yeah.
They're gonna say.
Well, it depends, right? I mean, so all these bills in conjunction, if it's an LLC, and they pass service tax, and then they also pass the LLC adjustment that you get taxed on the gross, then you'll be taxed on the gross, right? And here's the other thing: they want to eliminate itemized deductions too. That's also a bill.
Wow.
So as I'm saying, like, you guys and your listeners should be paying attention to what we're doing in Annapolis, because when you start stacking, any one of these is bad, but when you add our energy policies and what we're trying to do to raise property taxes, and then eliminating the inheritance tax, right, and lowering the threshold for estate taxes, so more of the properties you're trying to buy are going to be taxed at 16% on top of whatever else you're doing, and then the services tax is going to tax all the services, right, and then changing the LLCs that you get taxed at the gross. When you start stacking all these things up and up and up and eliminate itemized deductions, I mean,
yeah,
crippling.
It almost makes no sense to run the business.
Yeah, and then do they not think
I don't
about?
laugh because it's funny. It's like, oh my God, what are you going to do? But that's me. Me and my colleagues in the Ways and Means Committee are the folks. We're the wall fighting this thing back.
Like, and I guess in a general sense, do they not think about how it's going to affect like landlords and like their opportunity to help people who need a place to rent?
Well, that's where I come in. Me and my colleagues on my side of the aisle, we come in and we talk about this is going to have these net effects, right? And there is some juice this year in the last couple of years because Governor Moore, one of his big initiatives is create more housing and things of that nature, right? More because we have a huge housing crisis where, I mean, I've heard estimates anywhere from 90 to 150,000 units upside down in Maryland, right? Lack of units. And that has a ripple effect. Right, and so even some citizens who want to buy their first home. Well, one of the reasons housing prices have skyrocketed is because of lack of inventory, right? And an example we talked about today is like somebody looking to go from the $300,000 home to a $500,000 home, right? Like that's a good thing because if I go to my second home That's $500,000. That creates a brand new first-time home buyer home at $300,000, right? So it helps create more inventory. And what you guys do is you create new inventory because you take properties that in some cases are completely unlivable, and without developing any new land, without buying a farm and turning it into a whole bunch of houses, you're taking a property that is considered useless and making it someone's home, right? You're creating new inventory, and that takes pressure off of overall housing prices. It takes pressure off the lack of housing, gives people to live, right? What's the three most important things that people need? They need shelter, they need food, and they need security, right? I mean, go back to cavemen, right? Club, security, food, hunter-gatherer, shelter, cave, right? That's our three most basic needs, right? And you guys provide one of those three, right?
So why would somebody want to, like Governor Moore, want to de-incentivize people like us to do what we're doing?
Well, and that's the conversation, and that's where folks like me come into play, is to carry that banner and have that conversation, explain, hey, the housing's supposed to be very important to you, but these things have this net negative effect on what you're trying to accomplish, and they're competing with each other. And so that's where the bill hearings, that's where you guys coming down to Annapolis to testify, to tell your story, to explain how these things would hurt other initiatives, right? Like more housing. That's where me and you all telling your story that's where the rubber hits the road.
So are all these crazy policies coming out because we had a shift in governor, or were they coming?
No, I
down?
mean, these policies have been going on for a long, long time, and some of these policies go back to the O'Malley administration, right? So there's nothing new under the sun. It gets more and more momentum. Sometimes it's some of these things are not bad intentioned, right? Somebody has a constituent, somebody sees a problem, somebody hits half the story, right? But they don't hear the other side of the story sometimes. They want to help this constituent. That's where testimony. What testimony really is, when someone comes to testify, you're not opposing a bill. You're trying to educate the legislators on your side of the story and the bigger picture. It's an education piece. Right now, if everybody comes down and says the exact same thing, it gets boring. But if people come down there and have their own stories and talk about what's happening, that it has a ripple effect, right? And it's just, and if your industry is not represented down there, then you're on the sideline.
So for people that are people like you listening to their constituents with problems that they have, is it really heavily so you have areas obviously that are more lower on the socioeconomic status and some that are higher. Do they represent, if they represent more people on the low end of that spectrum?
They're probably going to be more on the side of renters' rights and things of that nature, right?
So then if we came down there, would that even make them sway in a different direction not pass
well, it
something
depends.
like that?
Are you guys doing the right thing? And do you guys take care of, your tenants? And do you guys provide good, clean housing? And are you guys doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
then and if that's the case, then your story is going to matter.
But how do we even prove that? Because I do feel sometimes like people demonize, and even just, I don't even get involved, but sometimes you see on Facebook and some of these neighborhood groups that I'm in the city, especially, where they're literally calling us rich, white, whatever name they want to put it behind that. They're really coming after people, anybody with money, it seems like, or anybody that has any kind of.
But here's the thing: there's a lot of investors that aren't well off, right? There's a lot of investors that they're clawing and scratching and trying to make a way, right? That's why a lot of veterans get into investing, because a lot of veterans come out of the military without a lot of skills, right? But here's a path where I can, and there's a lot of veterans who have a hard time working for somebody. Right, you get out of the Marine Corps. For me, you get out of the Marine Corps. It took me a while to learn how to work for somebody in the civilian world, right? For a variety of reasons, maybe PTSD, who knows? Definitely PTSD. But and you can think, we rattle off 10 names right now, people that were veterans that are investors now, right?
Chase,
right?
There you go.
One right here,
Alex Van Brooklyn, Tyler Banks, and we can go on and on and on, right? So. and that's part of telling the story. You know what I mean? You know, and that's and it gets skewed because, to their credit, the people that do have the big apartment buildings and the big, you know, that have a large volume of units, they're the ones who typically testify. But the little guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 units, individual units that you've rehabbed and turned into something that's sitting there dead, into something that's viable, helping the community, right? That's a story that you all need to tell.
I see how this is pretty important then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Something that we had no idea about before. So, okay. So we have, we talked about the energy. I did had a couple other things that I wanted to get to.
Sure.
One was the landlord-tenant stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's going on.
Oh, yeah.
Can we touch on some of that stuff that you mentioned?
Yeah, I got to bust out my notes because there's a lot going on. And so and I'm just going to give a 50,000-foot view. I mean, some of these get very technical and very in the weeds. But one of them is good cause for not renewing someone's lease, right? So it's going to require landlords to prove, and it gets very delineated and gets very technical and very in the weeds. But you won't be able to I'm not going to renew your lease. You're going to have to be able to justify, if this bill passes, why you're not renewing the lease and having to abide. And this is the bill. I mean, look, you know, there's a lot to it, right? It's a big bill. There's all kinds of things that you have to meet, requirements you have to meet and prove to not renew somebody's lease. Like one of them is, if you don't renew somebody's lease, you have to prove that that property will not be on the market for at least a year.
But what if the reason that you're not renewing the lease because you need to sell the property?
Well, I would assume that would qualify under you're not putting it back on the market for a year. Right?
Oh, market as renting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, that's part of the conversation
That's
needs to happen,
wild.
right? Because you guys need to come down and talk about that. Well, what if I sell the property? You know, testify on that. You know,
Right.
and then we get to ask questions of the witnesses, right, and help augment those stories. So that's a first question I thought of. Well, what if someone's selling the property, right? Is selling the property a good cause?
Yeah.
Right, because sometimes you need to sell the property to extract the equity to go to the next thing.
Good cause
Right.
is very subjective. Who determines what good cause is?
The Maryland General Assembly do.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a voice in the matter, they'll do it without you.
Yeah.
So what date is that? So when a bill's getting ready to be passed, the first question is, when a bill's getting ready to be thought about, how long does it take from that thought to being passed?
I mean, it takes sometimes years, sometimes months, sometimes weeks, sometimes days.
And then this bill in particular here that you're discussing, is that coming up towards
I don't
the end
know.
of it? Or?
I don't have the bill hearing dates for each of these. You can certainly reach out to my office and I get information, or you can look it up on the General Assembly website. So that bill is House Bill 709. So if you go to the Maryland General Assembly website, look up HB 709. It'll have all the details, the finer points of the bill hearing date, committee, things of that nature.
It sounds like a lot of work just for somebody like us to keep up with all the bills.
Yeah, listen, you know, and I have two full-time jobs. I have my day job in this industry, and then my job doing this, and it's hard for me to keep up. So, and I'm basically living down there for 3 months. So yeah.
Yeah, I get, just to sidetrack a little bit.
Yeah.
What you mentioned on a text that we were texting back and forth that you were in season is
Session.
So what does that mean? Like,
So we only meet in Annapolis to make laws for 3 months a year, from the second Tuesday in January to the first Monday at midnight in April. So we write all the laws in that 90-day period. So when I'm there, I have to basically, most of the time I'm spending 20% of the time doing legislative duties and 80% doing my regular job. This time of year, I'm doing 80% legislative duties in Annapolis and 20% my day job. Because this is supposed to be a citizen legislature, so we only make so much money being legislators. So we have to have regular jobs that feed our families. So I'm doing both all the time. Now, I'm not a martyr about it. Like, I was clear-eyed. I knew what I was getting into. So I'm not feeling sorry for myself, or nor is anybody else. But it is
so
a ton.
if you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
how much does somebody like you make doing politics?
Well, it's public record. They passed a bill a couple of years ago. I voted against it, but to increase the pay from $50,000 a year to $56,000 a year over 4 years. So by 26, this job would pay $56,000 a year. But I can say that because it's public record. Like anything public official, it's all disclosed and all that. So
damn, that's not a lot of money.
not for more than 40-hour-week job in addition to the regular job. But listen, if you're doing this for the money, it's the wrong reason. I'm just telling you, like this is a labor of love, or self-loathing. So
It almost seems worse
Masochism.
than teaching, being a teacher.
Yeah, no, that does. It sounds like brutal. So, do you have ambitions to go into the next level of politics at all?
I mean, it's what they say. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I mean, that's kind of, well, you know, if things break a certain way, sure. If they don't, so be it. You know what I mean? Like, I have a great career. You know, I have a great situation. So, but you know, you don't get in these positions without a little bit of ambition. So we'll see what happens.
So somebody like Larry Hogan, for example, who is a Republican in a very democratic state. Yep. How does something like that shake out? Like, how does he get in?
So there's part of it's the environment, right? 2014 was a year where people were really frustrated with Democrat policies. Halfway the second term of Obama, people were tired of taxes. People were just tired of a lot of things, right? So there was a mood. There's also, because of that, a lack of enthusiasm on the Democrat side. So, which means they weren't going to turn out. Drill down to Maryland, you're coming off the O'Malley administration where you just had 42 straight tax hikes, right, including the rain tax and a couple of things that really stuck with people. So Democrats generally were not showing up. There were a lot of blue dog Dems, moderate Democrats who were tired of some of the policy positions made. And Larry Hogan didn't have a voting record. Where, like, I would never run for governor, right? Because I voted on some things that I believe in that would be very unpopular for me to run statewide, which would be used against me. Larry Hogan was never in office. He was running and is as a business person, right? So they couldn't stick him on all these other issues they could nail him on because he voted this way or that way. He ran against the policies that hurt the entire state financially. And it was, the conditions were right. Now, to his credit, you know, he capitalized on it and parlayed that to a second term, which nobody thought was possible either time. And he won that handily because of how he handled his first term. But some of it's environmental circumstances, the mood of the people.
So then I guess we switch gears to Wes Moore, which is like, he's like on the total opposite end of the spectrum. Is that because people weren't happy with how Larry Hogan was finished up his thing, or
no? Like, it was there was high enthusiasm on the Democrat side, not only against Trump but against the Republican nominee Dan Cox. So there was high enthusiasm by the Democrats nationally in Maryland and against Dan Cox. And I mean, that was a big part of it, right? Again, environmental factors affecting local elections.
So you think the part of that issue was like the political climate, I guess,
yes,
from a national level with
Trump? That does have an effect, right? Which is fascinating, like right now, because you look at Trump's popularity is sky high. You know what I mean? His popularity this time in his second term is higher than it was at this time his first term. So there's a real mood shift even happening. And I'm not trying to be partisan, because I know you have plenty of listeners that are Democrats and independents. So I'm not trying to be partisan. I'm just talking about from my point of view, right, and what my experience is. But you look at voter registration in different states, like in Pennsylvania, Democrats was 1 million more Democrats in Pennsylvania than Republicans in 2012. Now the number's cut down to 100,000, right? That's Pennsylvania. And that doesn't include people that are maybe Democrats that are voting Republican, just haven't got around to switching their registration. That's hard registrations, right? So Pennsylvania went from a relatively blue state to now a solid swing. 100,000 voter registration in a state like Pennsylvania, that's a swing state now, right? And that wasn't in play forever. Florida is now a safe red state, and they had a 1 million plus advantage in Democrats had a million plus advantage in Florida, and now that's a safe red state. It's completely reversed. Maryland stayed about flat. That's for a variety of reasons.
Do you think because we're the proximity to D.C.?
Definitely proximity to D.C., the size of the state. I mean, we're a very small state that houses 2 major cities, and people in cities are typically more Democrat for a variety of reasons. So that's had a major impact on us.
That's interesting. So we talked about the energy stuff. I gotta.
You gotta touch on the landlord tenant laws just a little more.
I'll get back. So let's dive back into that. So I talked about good calls, right? And I did talk about the policy we passed a couple of years ago that raised the eviction filing fee, and now you're funding the legal defense against yourself.
Yeah,
it's like literally paying a lawyer to sue you.
Rent control is on my list. Yeah. Rent control, is that a thing that's coming down the?
Well, rent control. That's something I know. I think Montgomery County has a bill talking about rent control. There's actually a bill that kind of and I'm going to get to that deals with late fee caps and things of that nature as well. But rent control is something that's very popular right now from some of the particularly very far left, and you see some of the counties trying to move in that direction. So that's where if your listeners that live in like Howard County or Montgomery County need to contact their legislators, need to contact their county council folks, and have those conversations. Like, this is going to make it, because like you have a market, right? You charge what the market allows you to charge, right? Until external factors force you to raise rents, right? Because you work off a margin, right? This has to make sense. This is not charity for you. You wish it was, but it's not charity. There's got to be some meat on the bone, right? For this to make sense for your labor, right? And your time. And when these environmental factors come in, like increased property tax assessments, increased energy costs, increased taxes, all these factors, now you're forced to raise rents. And if rent controls don't accommodate those environmental factors, then you're upside down and you're out.
Aren't a lot of those rent control bills though, like you have to own 5 houses or more? Is it
typically it's 6.
6.
But how many people?
Right.
You
would be screwed.
Yeah. 6 is.
I'm just saying, but
6 isn't that many.
No.
For somebody that's a full-time investor,
it isn't that money.
Yeah.
And somebody who's a full-time investor with 6 properties, you're not wealthy.
right?
Right. I mean, how much you're making on? I mean, you get some of these properties, you're making 15, 20 grand a year, right? And if you 6 properties, if you're netting 100 grand a year, I mean, you're making it's a good wage, right? But you're working your tail off, and you're one bad policy decision from that 100 becoming 40, right?
Yeah.
So there's a law that happened that was in D.C. I don't know if it's still there, but requiring landlords to offer to sell the property to the tenants before they could sell it on the market. I heard somewhere they were trying to sneak that into Maryland as well.
Oh yeah, they've had that bill's been before us before. Yeah.
Wait, I thought that's already
that's a Baltimore City thing for sure.
Yeah.
So can we talk about that a little bit?
No. Sure.
I think it's county by county.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So is that something that is happening right now, or is it something we should be fighting?
It's something you should be fighting. You know what I mean? If you want to, right? And the thing is, juice versus squeeze. Is it a bad thing for you to give your tenant first right of refusal about the home?
No, and I don't mind that part of it, but what happened, and I could be wrong, but there was a lot of issues when they did it in D.C. where there was like opportunistic lawyers that were basically like strongholding landlords into not selling the property, or they were getting the buy rights. They were buying the buy rights from the tenants to, and I have to dig more into this. Maybe we'll talk about this.
No, I understand what you're saying. They were basically going to the tenant like,
here's a way that we make some money.
Yeah.
And I think that was for multifamily. Like, I don't think a multifamily maybe applies in one area or another, but I think I heard something in DC.
Because
I think
can't sell individual
DC.
units.
That's what I think I read something that it was.
it was.
Even if it was a multifamily.
It was multifamily?
It was multifamily.
Which makes it crazier.
And that's when the lawyers came in, like these opportunistic lawyers came in to the tenants and were buying their rights to buy the property.
And so that's where you can affect legislation and get an amendment on a bill preventing that practice, right? I mean, again, We're lawmakers. Like you're like, how do we change this? Well, we introduce a bill and we change the law. We put an amendment on a bill and change. Like literally, we're the ones who literally make the laws. How do you change it? Pass a bill. Who you know? You know me, and you're gonna know others. And the more you guys get activated and engage your legislators, you're gonna know the people that actually can do this, right?
Yeah.
It's really that close. People think it's as far off, magical, mystical. No, I mean it's like your legislator lives in your community. They have to live in the district where they represent. You know,
who's the person here in the Severn Park?
I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure offhand. I mean, probably know him or her very well. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just not something that's talked about a lot. Like, where would I even find that information? Or like, is it public? Like,
yeah,
I know obviously it's public. That was a bad. But like, obviously it's public. Everything you do is public. But it's not on TV, right? It's not on commercials. Like,
no, it's a Maryland General Assembly website. You just search, Maryland General Assembly, and I forget the name.
So you have to like physically really be looking.
You have to dive into this.
It's not a ton of work, right? It's not this. Again,
you have to know somebody that's going to tell you the website, because like otherwise, how would we know where to look?
That's what we're going to do right now. We're going to look at the website.
I feel like a dummy.
I feel like a dummy. This is why you invited me on, so we can have this conversation. Listen, they don't teach civics in schools the way they used to, right? Like people don't. The questions you ask are very, very, very typical questions. Like, and that's why it's so much fun to be on here, because I can actually, we can have this real conversation. So the website is, give me one sec.
Like you would think, are you guys allowed to like advertise? Like, can you get a TV commercial or something?
Yeah, I campaign. I have a campaign account. I run for re-election. I buy ads and billboards and mailers and the whole thing. Like that's how we get reelected.
And people can like donate to that.
No, we're not allowed. So just so you know, this is during the legislative session. We have a blackout period, so I'm not even allowed to talk about fundraising during this time. So
okay.
I can't even bring it up.
Okay.
So so the website is mgaleg.maryland.gov, and that's the Maryland General Assembly website. And to find your legislator, there's actually a link. It says "Find my legislator," and then you put your address in, and it'll tell you who represents you.
You said that's
mgaleg.maryland.gov.
Okay,
that's interesting. So okay,
and that's where you can look up all the bills. You can find all the information about the bills that we're introducing and passing or not passing this year. That's where you sign up to testify on bills. That's where you can look up the legislation, details in the legislation. And that's also where you can find out who your legislator is and their contact information. And then you can contact them and tell them how you feel.
Okay, so would you suggest, like, if we see, like, for somebody like us that in real estate investing full time, we contact our person, whoever our legislator is, and say, hey, this is the bill that we're just made aware
and we're
of.
opposed to this bill, and this is how it's going to hurt me. This is how it's going to hurt your constituents who are my tenants.
Yeah, I feel like we should probably pay more attention to this.
Yeah, there's a lot that we could write in about. I mean, the first one being, right, like we have some rental listings that go up on the ether, whether that's Zillow, MLS, or whatever, and there's professional tenants, just like you said, that'll sit, they'll rent from you for 3 months, and they'll make a payment, and then they'll rent from you again.
So or people that are just come in and squat because they know that.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to.
And
the biggest thing is like
changed.
People will see these listings that are vacant on Zillow, and they know they're rentals, and they'll go break into them, and then they squat, and then it's like, as a landlord, you're like, now I have to pay money to evict this person who has absolutely no right to be here.
So they commit a crime by breaking in, but then all of a sudden, if they break in with no one seeing them, they're scot-free, which doesn't make any sense.
Agreed.
And they could just create a fake lease, and the cops can't do it. I don't say won't, but they can't do anything about it.
That sounds like a bill.
Because the police just say, every time that I've spoken to the police, they're like, they don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
It sounds like a bill, and hey, you know a guy who writes laws, so just saying.
Yeah, the squatting laws are absolutely insane.
Yeah, they are.
So we have a house in Florida, and I learned some of the laws down there. Like if somebody squats in your house, you could just go in there with a shotgun and remove them. Like it's like that. It's so far the other way. But here, if somebody breaks into your home has a fake lease, they have they automatically have all of these rights.
Yep.
How do we find out the history of those type of laws? Like, for example, I would love to learn about when and how squatters' laws have become a thing.
I mean, for practical purposes, you know, and this is going to sound dismissive. I don't mean to sound, but for practical purposes, the history doesn't matter. All that matters is what's in front of us and how do we fix it. You know what I mean? Because all of our biggest commodity is time. And, you know, I need to invest all my time in making things right.
Like introducing a bill like that where we get rid of squatter rights, like that sounds like a big feat.
I mean,
how does one go about introducing a bill where you're going up against, what is it, 132 Democrats?
Well, that's what I get paid for.
Right.
But it's also, you know, can you pass it? Who knows, right? But you have the conversation. And even if you can't pass the bill the way you want, maybe you can, you know, change things some to make it more fair, right?
But a bill like that, like, how is that even, like, there's morally right, there's morally wrong. Like, if anyone sees or hears that, how could they side with somebody agreeing with that bill?
But again, it's all about, you know, the General Assembly is 188 people, but then the House delegates 141 people. With everybody has a different constituency, a different life experience, and, you know, different points of view. And the General Assembly really is about expanding the members of the General Assembly's point of view, right? Giving different perspectives they don't have. And that's where testimony comes into play, because they may only have this one experience. And what they're doing it for what they feel is the right reason. And it may be completely the actually right reason. But all of us, me included, sometimes don't understand the other side or the ripple effects or what I talk about, the unintended consequences, right? And if people don't show up to talk about how this could hurt them, even if it's helping this other person, then they never hear that perspective, and shame on the people for not showing up.
Yeah, that's some wild stuff. So if you're listening to this and you are a landlord that's been affected by squatters, which I think most people, I feel like if you've done this enough and you have enough houses, you've had squatters.
Or even realtor. I mean, I had one of my listings get broken into because they knew it was. And then I had to go explain to my seller that, hey, your listing just got broken into. Now we have to evict them. And my seller obviously was not too happy. And it's like, what? I mean,
right?
Who's to blame here, right? So
the law that allows for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
If people are allowed to do things they shouldn't be able to do, that's the law's fault. And it all falls on us for those laws, because we can affect those laws.
I have one about short-term rentals. Something that,
there's a lot of bills around that now.
Yeah. Something that we don't do too much of, but I know in Baltimore City, where most of our properties are, you can't do Airbnb or short-term rentals.
Right.
Less than 90 days or 60 days, whatever it is. Who is the one fighting? Is, like, I heard that's like the hotel lobbyists that are fighting for those.
I mean, everybody has different. I mean, the hotel lobby has been fighting to affect the short-term rental industry. So that's a thing. Yeah. So,
are you pro or against short-term rentals?
I mean, I'm into property rights, right? So if somebody wants to rent their property out, for short-term rental and take on a liability, that's on them. I really don't care, right?
Okay.
Like,
I like that. I like that take on it.
I'm a little bit libertarian on these things, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally it would, take away from hotels, like you mentioned. I'm not against it. And I'm not like, I'm kind of, because I don't have any, it doesn't.
But it's
really
like a fair market, right? Like that's what the free market allows for.
Yeah, similar like to Uber and Lyft, how they're taking away business from taxis, which I don't mind that at all. I think it's mainly the next door neighbor homeowner who, most of Baltimore City is a lot of townhouse, row houses, right. And it's the effect of, having new neighbors, every so often.
Well, and some of the conversations is starting to get some traction is around the party houses. Like there's people that have party houses for rental and short-term rental sites, right? That people know they can go and party and lose their minds, and it affects some of the neighbors and all that, right? So there is some self-regulation that needs to happen in that space for some of those reasons, right? And anytime you have a big party house, people lose their minds in a quiet little, suburban neighborhood, that gives the industry a bad name, right? And then the folks who want to stop short-term rentals will wave that flag and wave that banner because it gets a lot of publicity, So the bad actors always on either side of any issue are the ones that always get the most attention when trying to move the needle in any direction.
Yep. Okay. I have one more on my list here.
Let her rip.
So in Florida, we're seeing a big issue with this, and obviously now in California as well, property insurance, homeowners insurance. And here, it has gone up a lot. Like, I used to be paying $350
Florida's
a year.
Florida's wind damage, right?
Wind and flood.
Yeah. I mean, that's, California's fire, obviously. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, which is causing, especially in Florida and California, I know Florida more because I'm in that market, but people, especially older people on fixed incomes, are losing their homes because they can't afford to pay the insurance, or they're going without insurance, and then the next storm comes and wipes them out.
And remember, the insurance is also driven by costs to repair, which is driven by policy decisions, right? All these taxes, all these things we've done to affect the cost of goods and services, right? Makes it less likely to get insured because the cost to replace rises because of legislative policy decisions. So all these little things we do have ripple effects all the way down the line. So I'm sorry. I get off my soapbox. Continue your question.
So basically I've seen my homeowner's insurance on an average go from about $350 to $500 to $1,200 or more in the last couple of years. Have you guys noticed? Have you noticed the same? So are there bills or things that we could pass that limit or affect the price of the insurance?
Well, so do you support price controls or no? Do you support rent controls? It's slippery slope, right? You can't support it here and not support it over here.
Yeah.
Just that's the conversation, right? Like, because if I stand on my soapbox here and say we cannot, have rent controls on landlords with one or two little properties, but here we need to have controls over here, right? That would be used against me. So you got to always think about the domino effect of every single position we take on different policy.
So I guess, and I'm pro stating like you can't like price fix, right? Like I think that's a good rule for contractors or for somebody.
The market will suss it out.
Right.
Right.
But these big insurance companies that are obviously just pounding people over the head with these rates, even if like the price of, let's just say the price of repair for something has not tripled like the price of the insurance policy over the last, let's just call it 4 years. So I guess that goes back to the same thing. Like, I'm not for controlling the price, but
I mean, I see your point of view. Like, if they're increasing it 3 times and the construction costs haven't gone up 3 times, then.
But that's like somebody telling Ryan he can't increase his contracting prices because the price to build a house hasn't increased.
But I also feel like they all work together, though. The insurance companies.
Sure. Well, and see, I'm a classic Republican, conservative, free market capitalist. You know what I mean? Like, do I like some of the things? No. Do some of these things need to be reined in some capacity? Yes. If there's collusion where these insurance companies are working together to slowly raise their prices in conjunction, they should be fighting to lower them to be more competitive, right? But also, but it's a tough situation in Florida, right? Like, because you have some of this is affected by the cost of things. Right? The cost to replace. And some of that's policy decisions, some of that's inflation, like, so the fact that, for example, we have a huge shortage in housing stock in Maryland, which forces housing pricing up. And if housing pricing goes up, the cost to replace it goes up, which means insurance goes up organically and how it relates to that, right? And some of these are policy decisions, right? And what you guys do, you take pressure off the whole ecosystem. And these are the things you guys got to think about sometimes. I'm not trying to preach to you, this is your industry, right? But what you guys do, taking vacant properties that are unlivable and making them livable, takes one more family off the housing market into a home, which takes pressure off the entire ecosystem, right? So you guys are doing a good service, and you guys really should start being proud of what you guys do, because you guys do help everyone. Every unit you guys rehab, right, takes pressure off that $5,000 home, $500,000 home. And if you do enough of them, it turns into $490, right? Which now makes it a little bit less expensive to replace, and then insurance comes down a little bit. So it all works in conjunction up and down the line. So you guys should have a little more pride. Not that you don't, but when somebody says that you're an evil monster for rehabbing homes and renting them, you're like, well, you're doing a service.
Yeah.
You're providing shelter.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm out of my list of questions here. Nick, Chase, do you guys have anything?
Well, let me run through just a couple bills real fast.
Yeah.
I know we're running short of time. I would just give you the heads up on them. One bill is SB, which stands for Senate Bill, or HB for House Bill. Senate Bill 514. This would prevent criminal history records checks for your tenants. So good luck with that. I don't want to go too much detail, but there's another bill.
Wait,
That's a big deal.
you said and record, would that include like prior evictions and like prior failure to pays?
Well, that gets into House Bill 242 that will let you check credit history. That's another bill.
Jesus.
That's just like, then
What
there's
do
no
you
point in even screening anyone. Then you just
Yeah. So look up these bills
Let
for
them just
yourself.
walk through your
I know we
door.
don't have time for me to go in detail, but you should look at these bills and understand what you're allowed and not allowed to do. And these bills have to pass. But these are bills y'all should be showing up and testifying on, right?
I mean, what do they want us to do? Just ask them their name, and that's
yeah.
it.
What's your
I
name?
mean,
and social?
here's one, House Bill 273, that this bill prohibits a landlord from charging a penalty for a late payment of rent that exceeds 5% of the amount of unpaid rent due.
Yeah, I think it's always been 5% as long as I've known.
Well, this
No,
puts
no,
a cap on it.
That puts a cap on, so it's 5% of, so it puts more of a cap on it.
Here's an interesting
I thought
one.
that is the cap.
And
5%.
this one you may
But
understand.
it's recurring 5%.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha.
Here's one that you may understand more than me, and I just saw this one today, and I thought it was interesting. I think I understand it conceptually. Senate Bill 609, that this bill would prohibit a landlord from using an algorithmic device that uses non-public competitive data to set the amount of rent charged for the lease of a property or charge in rent. So this will prevent you from using AI from, this is how I read it, I may be wrong, from allowing you to use data of off-market properties to calculate what you're going to charge for rent. I may be wrong, but that's how I interpret it.
Because it says non-public, which
Oh,
most
you know what that means? Because most rentals aren't taken to public like the MLS is. So when you get an appraisal done, let's say for a rental property, they obviously appraise the full value of the house, and then the market rent. They pull the market rent from the MLS. Where I would guess, and this is just a guess, maybe 15% of actual data is on the MLS. The rest is literally off the market.
And I would say I would use AI or algorithms is the best tool to assess what an appropriate rent would be. That's market value. This bill prevents that.
So that's interesting because that's kind of like what you guys do down in Florida with your Airbnb. I was talking to Christian. They have an algorithm that basically with Airbnb adjusts the rate by day or week or whatever the other competitive houses are.
Yep.
So it'd make your house more competitive and probably less cheap in some cases.
So for some reason, there's a bill in to prevent that. So that's, again, Senate Bill 609. I would look that up. Here's short-term rentals and home amenity rentals, health and safety requirements. So this bill would establish all kinds of health and safety, and it may be a good thing, right? Like I'm not as familiar with the short-term rental market. That's not really, my bailiwick. But it establishes like you can't have cameras in there and surveillance inside the home, right? Like, and I think that's really fair. Like if I actually super agree with that. Like
I agree with that.
I don't want somebody putting a camera in my hotel room.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody putting a camera in my Airbnb.
I'm surprised that's not already a law.
Not that
We have cameras outside, like just like a ring camera, which I think is okay. But inside,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's invading privacy a little bit.
And this requires short-term rental owners to submit an annual report to the comptroller, include short-term rental units and platforms in the definition of hotel for local hotel rental tax purposes. So it would apply the hotel tax depending on your jurisdiction.
Do you guys have control over like state licenses too, and like contractor license. Like
Yep,
in Florida,
that falls in ours too.
Yeah, Florida, it's really hard to get your contractor license. Me and Ron were talking about that the other day.
So I put a bill in 2 years ago, specifically around veterans. It turned into a study that we're still waiting for the results back, because West Virginia, if you have a trade in the military and you go to West Virginia and you take basically a competency test, you get to pass everything by and go right to work. So I'm trying to do that here in Maryland for the trades. Our laws are so wonky and so convoluted that it went into a study. So they're studying what our laws are and how to do this. And once I get the results back, I'm going to put a series of bills in that allows veterans to go, if they've done that type of work in the military, to be able to take a test and go right to work here in Maryland.
Yeah,
so that would affect that. That's one piece of it. But yeah,
I have another question, just because like you're talking about veterans. What else are you pushing along for veterans? Because I mean, in this area, there's a ton, right? Like half the people I meet, one in five are veterans.
So I'm really blessed. So I'm vice chair of the House Veterans Caucus. I was the Maryland Military Coalition, which is the organization that all the other military organizations makes up the VFW and American Legion and all the Officer Association all make up the Maryland Military Coalition. I was their legislator of the year last year for my work on veterans. I'm really, really proud of that. I've passed a variety of bills. I passed a bill last year that reduces the threshold for the veterans disability tag to 50%. So if you're 50% disabled, as of right now, because of my bill, you can now get a disabled veterans tag.
Oh, I'm missing that right now.
Yeah, you can go right now. I passed a bill last year that gives free hunting and fishing licenses to veterans rated unemployable, which is different than 100% disabled. I have a bill this year to do the same thing for free vehicle registrations for unemployable veterans that I think is going to pass as well. The bill is looking at and assessing how we can get veterans in the trades right to work here in Maryland. It fills a lot of needs and a lot of holes there.
Where can veterans find the stuff that you're passing? Because like,
on the website I just gave,
the General Assembly website.
The General Assembly website, and you can contact me as well. I've introduced another bill this year to remove the age restriction on the exemption on military retirement tax from 55 to no minimums, because you can retire at 38.
Right.
You know what I mean? If I stay now, I'll retire at 38. So I probably I have several other bills. I have a bill right now that will counter military retirement, your military years in the military. A bill I just introduced today. Your military years will count towards your state pension if you're a state or county employee.
Wow. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's one of my bills this year. So I mean, it's a host. I mean, a couple dozen veterans related bills that I've introduced, and I've passed some. So no, I fight my tail off for
definitely
veterans.
Definitely gonna be reaching out to you, because I mean there's a lot of stuff on the internet that I looked up, and I always thought it was 100% to get your disability tags. Like
it was. Now it's 50% as of October 1 of last year because of my bill.
That's awesome.
I got a question a little off the topic of what we have been discussing, but do you know the rules or laws around opening a dispensary?
That's not my strong suit.
Cup of tea.
Because the General Assembly is a bit of divide and conquer, right? Like there's a lot of, we're gonna have 3,500 bills probably in General Assembly this year, 3,500 last year, and so on, right? So that's not something that I'm super involved in, so I can't really.
Gotcha.
The reason he's asking is one of our buddies said that in order to get one here, you have to be connected to like some sort of politician, essentially.
I can't help you with that. I know the answer to that, so.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
I can tell you I can't help you with that.
All right, this is my last question.
Please.
How many bills get passed each year?
Usually between 800 and 900.
Good question.
Think about
8
that.
to 900?
Jesus.
Holy shit.
I can't
even read that much.
Is there a limit?
And that doesn't include there's no limit, and that doesn't include the budget, which is a huge $67 billion piece of legislation, right? Yeah.
To go back to the budget real quick, you said before, we as a state have to have a balanced budget
as required by the state constitution.
So, but the federal government doesn't.
No,
because we just keep borrowing, and
correct.
That's what. So, when they say like states, like New York, right? New York, I feel like they have a problem with affordability. I'm from New York originally. most people that worked as a blue collar or middle income type of person does not retire in New York.
Right.
So somebody
or in Maryland.
Right. In New York, I think is even a more of the case because it's just so crazy expensive.
Yeah.
But somebody like my parents who retired to Delaware to pay less taxes,
Absolutely.
or people that go to Florida. Now, my dad worked for the state, for the railroad. He collected, and still is collecting pension from New York.
Sure.
But spending it in Delaware, or people are spending it in Florida. Those states cannot be net positive or even net zero. Like, how are they? Like, New York is famously I feel like spending more than they.
Well, I mean, that's why they tax more, right? Because states like Maryland think we can tax our way out of our financial problems, right? So we give more entitlements, we give more services, right? So we tax people's retirements, we tax people at a higher rate. They leave, but instead of making cuts, they just tax the people that remain at a higher rate. And that's what happens over and over and over again. And there's a bit of a dependency on federal employees that are kind of stuck here to some extent. But we had, I think, what was the number? It was either 20 or 20,000 Marylanders moved to Virginia last year, right? Those are federal employees. Those are people that live in a D.C. area that are people that should be living in Maryland, paying taxes in Maryland, spending their, going to our restaurants, using our hospitality, right? They're going to Virginia because it's a lot cheaper to live there, right? So Virginia is cleaning our clock right now. And that's just for people actively working. Retirees, we have no hope to keep these folks, right? I mean, we tax military retirement in Maryland, right? Think about that. So, and here's another bill. This is a good one. So right now, the residency requirement is 6 months, right? So if you live in another state for 6 months and a day, you pay their taxes. There's a bill in front of us. We had the bill hearing the other day. They'll increase it in Maryland to 9 months. So you have to live in another state for 9 months not to pay Maryland taxes. So buckle up for that.
Yeah.
I assume you might be one of those people that might spend half the year in Florida.
No, not half. I'm here.
Shame on you, then.
I'm the winter.
Shame on you.
I winter away.
Listen, if I could afford it, I have a place in Florida. Now, I have to be a Maryland resident, obviously, too, so I couldn't do that. But when I'm done this, political stuff, I mean, like, I love Maryland. I grew up here. I think Maryland's the best state in the country. But we've made it so I can't afford to retire here. You know what I mean? And I want to stay. And one of the reasons I'm General Assembly is I've said I'm fighting to give me the opportunity to retire here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's a good fight too, like you grew up here, you want to stay here, but the state's going to push you out when we get to that age and it's not affordable anymore.
That's right. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, I guess I've always been in the camp of just like make more, but there's so many people that are not in that camp to be able to just stay. Because I feel like if you want to stay, you figure it out kind of thing. But it does make sense, like places like New York and places.
But especially when you retire, right? Now my incomes are fixed, generally speaking, right? I have my pension and this, that, and the other, right? And I can stay in Maryland where it's getting taxed to death, or I can go to Florida where it's not taxed. I mean, and I'm getting the same pension because the amount's not changing. It's just what the government's taking is different.
And it has to hurt the state when people leave.
Which is why they raise more taxes on all of us. Those that are left behind have to pay more taxes.
So it basically all kind of falls down to the people that are owning the businesses, making the most money.
And frankly, the people that can't leave. It hurts the people the most that don't have the
ability to leave,
the economic mobility to be able to relocate, which is typically middle to lower income folks who are the ones who at the end of the day, carry most of the burden, because even though they have a bunch of tax breaks, they're still paying sales tax, they're still paying gas tax, they're still paying higher electricity costs, et cetera, higher insurance costs, higher vehicle registration fees. So even though the lower income folks get taxed at a lower rate, they're still paying all the main taxes that everybody else pays, but they just can't afford to leave.
Yeah. Did you see?
And doubly so because they will never be able to go over the hump to be able to ever afford to leave because they're so burdened with all the different taxes we have here.
Did you see that Trump introduced a bill, I guess, to put a stop to federal income tax? Do you think?
I got to be honest. Like when I'm in the middle of a legislative session, it is such chaos with what we're facing here. I've not even had really the bandwidth to look what's going on generally federally.
So, state income tax, is that something that you guys talk about? And
I mean, I would love to eliminate the state income tax. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's not going to happen.
Right.
This conversation,
because our neighbor, right, Delaware doesn't have a state income tax, right? So like
this Florida, and that's not going to happen because we've put forth so much mandatory spending legislation that there's no way.
So it's not worth us writing an email to.
And we got to find $3 billion more by the end of March.
Like as a state.
Yeah.
What happens if we don't?
Yeah,
we will. We have to by law. We're going to find that $3 billion, whether it's from cuts, but most likely out of Marylanders' pockets.
Yeah. Cuts meaning spending cuts. Like
yes, but we're not. There's some talk that there's spending cuts, but the budget's actually higher.
What happened to all the gambling money?
Spent.
Yeah, wasn't it supposed to be spent on the schools?
And they're trying to raise the tax. Yeah. That's a whole different conversation. So racing and gaming is my committee. Education's my committee. Taxes is my committee. So I deal with all these issues.
You said
racing?
Racing and gaming is my committee.
Like horse racing?
Horse racing,
Horse racing, okay.
So, because they started doing sports betting here.
Yep.
Nick knows all about that.
Now they're trying to do iGaming, which is, table games online. That's another thing they're trying to push right now.
So isn't that a crazy way to just like make a bunch of money? I mean, you got people spending a bunch of money on gambling.
But the thing is, a lot of times the money's spent before the bill's even passed. You know what I mean? Which is one of the fascinating things. Like the cannabis money was spent and already dedicated to something else before the bill even became law. They already said we're going to spend it on X, Y, and Z, right? So like one of the proposals in front of us is to raise taxes on the casinos. There's a casino in Maryland that 50% of their gross revenue goes to the state. Not the Fed, the state.
Which one?
I don't remember offhand. There's only 6 casinos, but I remember looking at the report as we're getting the briefing on this because they're trying to raise taxes on casinos once again because, keep going back to the well,
right. Damn, there's so much to know.
This a lot. And frankly, we are scratching the surface,
Yeah.
But I really wanted, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and how all these things, the ripple effects, every policy decision, again, to go back to the beginning, anytime we spend money, ultimately ends up in the laps of citizens and landlords and investors.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely opened my eyes to... It's funny. I mean, I guess somebody linked us together to get you on the show or whatever, and I was just like, "What the hell's a state delegate?" That was my first thing, and now I'm like, "Wow, I need to know way more about what the state delegates do." I feel like that's affecting our lives way more than.
Is there one day a month that we could just get together and just come down to Annapolis?
I'd love to have you guys down, and then if you want to do we get together after session's over and do a post-session recap, a damage assessment. We can do that too.
Yeah.
After action.
We haven't ever talked about politics on the show or really pushed it at all.
But this isn't politics, right? We're not talking about politics. Just to be clear for everybody who's watching. We're talking policy, and there's a difference. Politics is bomb throwing and yelling at each other and shaming everybody, right? This is policy conversations, right? And lawmaking, and this is really not nearly as partisan as politics is. This is trying to do the right thing, trying to make good decisions, trying to make people successful and thrive. And when you tax them to death, it doesn't have that net effect.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
All right, so we'll have a second session after your session.
Let's go.
We'll have a second.
I think we should have some investors come together, meet up with.
We have a summit.
Maybe
we have a summit.
A panel.
That would be sick.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool. All right. Well, keep your eye out for that. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate all this stuff. And
thank you.
Again, could you give us your email once more?
Yeah, mike.griffith@house.state.md.us. Yeah, it's a mouthful, I know.
Okay. And that's anybody in your constituency or outside?
Any of you can reach out to me.
Okay.
I'm happy to help. And if it's a matter where I need to refer somebody to their legislator, I'm happy to do that.
And are all the states set up the same way?
Generally, yeah. I mean, it's just like the federal government, state government. You have the House, Senate, and the executive branch in D.C. That's the president. Here it's the governor, House, Senate, and then of course the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court of Maryland.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. You guys have anything else to?
Nope.
I appreciate you for coming on. It was great information. I learned a lot.
I know it's a busy time for you right now.
No, but this is a real treat for me. This is kind of the fun stuff I get out of the swamp, so to speak, and have real conversations with real folks and try to make a little bit different. So thank you guys.
Awesome.
Thank
All right,
you.
guys. Till next time.